Hello there, my name is Pavor Shtermoch and now we'll unveil the top news of recent days. The Russian dictator addressed the Federal Assembly of Russia. It is surprising why Putin addressed the West and Western politicians during his almost half-hour address to the Assembly of Russians. At the same time, all the phrases were so familiar that it is quite difficult to single out something. As the president of Ukraine once said, Leonid Kuchma, "We've seen it already. There were threats of nuclear weapons, puffing of cheeks and waving of fists. Only to show Kuzka's mother was not enough." Of course, Putin did not expect that the war with Ukraine would drag on for so long. The text of the message even included complaints that the West wants to drag us into an arms race. But the main message of the signal remains the same as it was. This is the so-called strategic stability in the world. How convenient to destroy everything and then ask for stability in the world. It was not without threats to Europe, which has forgotten what war is.
It is necessary to strengthen groups in the Western strategic direction to neutralize threats associated with the next expansion of NATO to the east, the dragging of Sweden and Finland in the alliance. They are talking about the possibility of sending NATO military contingents to Ukraine, but we remember the fate of those who once sent their contingents to our country. But now the consequences for possible interventionists will be much more tragic.
By the way, this was a reaction to the words of French President Emmanuel Macron, and his position was confirmed by the Minister of France, Gabriel Attal. He stated that France can send troops to Ukraine, but not to the front line. The French military can train soldiers of the armed forces, operate air defense equipment and guard the border. And somehow it turns out, strangely, NATO equipment is already fighting against Russia. Ukrainian warriors who were trained by NATO instructors are fighting against Russia. Russian planes are shot down by air defenses provided, in particular by NATO countries, but Putin's threats are being heard only now. And one more important point regarding foreign contingents in Russia. As the Ukrainian authorities have repeatedly said, we only plan to leave the borders of 1991. We will not fight on the territory of Russia. We only want territorial integrity, and as soon as it is restored, perhaps hostilities will end. Until then, Putin needs to convince everyone that this war of aggression has at least some meaning other than the bloody wishes of one dictator. Therefore, after addressing the event, there was a text about milk, education, youth, alcohol, and other life problems. Clearly pre-election messages which were constantly applauded by the aging Russian elite. Well, the dictator's next appeal was liked by all his subjects and brought nothing to the world. Therefore, Ukrainians will continue to fight. By the way, Russia is not sitting idly by, but is looking for accomplices in the world. For example, today negotiations between leading Palestinian factions began in Moscow. The Palestinian ambassador to Russia said that Palestinian organizations, including Fatah and Hamas, plan to discuss the formation of a new unified government, as well as the problem of post-conflict restructuring of Gaza. As Ruslan Suleimanov, an independent expert on the Middle East, told Deutsche Welle, this is not the first time the creation of a Palestinian United Front has been discussed. At the same time, Russia does not have any roadmap on the Palestinian issue, especially on the Gaza Strip, since it is necessary to maintain good contacts both with Israel and with the paramilitary wing of Hamas in Gaza, he notes. Well, Moscow wants to highlight its geopolitical influence ahead of the Russian presidential elections. However, previous rapprochement talks, which took place in Moscow, Algeria and Cairo, also failed to achieve a lasting agreement. All Palestinian representatives who have positions in different countries were invited to the event in Moscow. The Islamic Jihad movement in Palestine is an Islamist Arab terrorist group headquartered in Damascus, with officials going on waging religions war, the destruction of Israel and the creation of a Palestinian Islamic State throughout all of Palestine. Most Western countries, especially the USA and EU countries, as well as Israel, recognize this organization as terrorist. Islamic Jihad, in turn, proclaims Israel, the United States and pro-Western Arab regimes as the embodiment of imperialism and considers them the objects of its struggle. Does this mean that we are talking about the sides in the next World War? The German tabloid edition Bild published a theoretical scenario of a Russian attack on NATO with reference to a government document presented to the German parliament. According to the document, a Russian attack implies a fundamental change in the security situation for the whole of Europe.
Europe, the countries of democracy, have only two options. The first one, accelerating assistance towards Ukraine in order to inflict defeat today and minimize the damage incurred by the Russian Federation. The second one, to continue long conversations, doubts, thinking about pacifying the creature, and in the end to personally clash with the Russian army on their own territories, with the army which is growing to biblical proportion, which has abundantly tasted human blood and does nothing else but robbing, raping, killing. Mikhailo Podolyak, advisor to the head of the office of the President of Ukraine on social network X.
According to the authors of the document, a Russian attack could consist of 4 phases. According to Bild, for the first phase of Russia's attack on NATO countries will be a massive disinformation campaign, especially in the media and social networks. The goal of the Russian Federation here will be to divide society, destabilize it, and undermine trust in liberal democracy. In addition, cyber attacks and attacks on critical infrastructure facilities are expected, power lines, dams, etc. The second phase will consist of major maneuvers of Russian troops on the borders of the alliance. The allies will respond to this by deploying their own troops on the eastern border. This will lead to the appearance of the first refugees. This phase will also be characterized by increased espionage, acts of sabotage, cyber attacks, and attacks especially to interfere with the movement of NATO troops. It is also possible to disable satellites in space. The third phase involves a direct attack by the Russian Federation on NATO countries. The territory of Germany is subject to targeted missile strikes, and mass destruction of satellites is also expected. In the fourth phase of the conflict, Russian troops break through to German territory, fighting taking place on land, at sea, and in the air. The authors of the document admit that the Russian Federation can use biological, chemical, and even tactical nuclear weapons. I have just one question now. How much time is still left on the doomsday clock? That concludes our today's video. Thank you for watching. Stay updated, comment, like, and subscribe to our UATV English channel for more news from Ukraine. Your support is that really matters. Goodbye.